I'm Laura Mitchell, 35 years old, a CPA who clawed her way up from nothing. I started working at 16, flipping burgers, tutoring anything to pay my own way through college. Never asked my family for a dime, not once. After years of grinding, I finally bought my dream home in Portland, Oregon with every penny I earned. I thought it was my moment to shine. But then my stepmom served me court papers claiming I stole my half-sister's future by not handing her the keys. You heard that right? She sued me for buying my own house. She said it was my duty to fix my sister's endless financial messes. The betrayal hit like a freight train. How could my own family drag me through a lawsuit over something I worked so hard for? If you think this story is crazy, hit like and subscribe so you won't miss any twists in this real-life family drama. And don't forget to share your own story if you've ever been in a similar situation. I really want to know. I'm not the only one. Once you're done listening, rate my story on a scale of 1 to 10. I'd love to hear what you think. To understand how my life got so messy, you have to go back to my childhood in Portland, Oregon. My parents divorced when I was 5 and Mom moved to Arizona, cutting contact completely. It was just me and Dad living in our cozy house on Belmont Street. He'd make me pancakes on Sundays and tell me I could do anything if I worked hard enough. But when I was 8, Dad married my stepmom, Susan Bennett. A year later, they had my half-sister, Jessica Bennett. I was 9, excited to have a little sister, but that joy didn't last. When I was 10, Dad died in a car accident. My world fell apart and I was left with Susan and baby Jessica. Susan never tried to be a mom to me. Her whole world revolved around Jessica, her own daughter. I'd come home from school with straight A's, and Susan would say, "That's nice, Laura, but Jessica took her first steps today." Jessica's toys piled up in the living room while my books stayed in a corner. Susan bought Jessica sparkly dresses for kindergarten, but I got second-hand clothes from thrift stores. When I asked why, Susan said Jessica's younger, Laura. She needs to feel special. It hurt, but I kept quiet, not wanting to make waves. By 12, I saw how Susan's favoritism shaped Jessica. She'd cry for new toys and Susan would rush to buy them. Once, when I was 13, Jessica wanted a fancy dollhouse for her birthday. Susan took $300 from the college fund Dad left me to pay for it. I found out when I checked the account and confronted her. "Jessica deserves nice things," Susan said sharply. "You're old enough to handle it." I wasn't. I felt like I was losing Dad all over again, but I swallowed my tears and moved on. At 16, I decided I couldn't rely on Susan. I got a job at a coffee shop on Alberta Street, working late shifts to buy school supplies and clothes. Susan didn't notice she was busy signing Jessica up for dance classes or buying her new gadgets. Jessica would show off her phone, smirking while I counted change for my bus fare. I saved every penny, determined to make it on my own. When I got a partial scholarship to college, Susan didn't care. She was too focused on Jessica's latest hobby, a fashion blog that never took off. When I was 17, I invited Susan and Jessica to my high school graduation. I'd worked hard to be valedictorian, hoping they'd see me for once. Susan arrived late, fussing over Jessica's new outfit. After the ceremony, she handed me a card and said, "Good job, Laura, but Jessica's tired." I stood there holding my diploma, feeling invisible. That day, I stopped seeking Susan's approval. I tried connecting with Jessica when she was 10. I took her to a cafe, hoping we could talk like sisters. She rolled her eyes and said, "You're always so perfect, Laura." It's annoying. Susan had turned her against me, making me the enemy. It stung, but I let it go. By 19, I was in college, working 2 jobs, waitressing and tutoring to cover tuition and rent. Susan never asked how I managed. Instead, she'd call to rave about Jessica's new YouTube channel, another flop she funded without question. At 22, I graduated college debt-free, a CPA job waiting for me downtown. Susan didn't come to my graduation. She was busy bailing out Jessica's failed online clothing store. Neighbors would hear her brag Jessica's going to be a star, while I was just Laura, the responsible one. Those years taught me I couldn't count on Susan or Jessica. Family wasn't about blood, it was about who showed up for you. I carried that lesson forward, building my life step by step until the day I bought my house. Buying my house was supposed to be a fresh start, a moment to celebrate everything I'd worked for. I wanted to share that joy, so I invited Susan and Jessica to a small housewarming party at my new place in Portland's Laurelhurst neighborhood. I spent days cleaning, setting up a buffet with sandwiches and drinks, even hanging string lights in the backyard to make it special. I hoped, maybe naively, that for once, we could act like a family. My boyfriend Michael Grant, a third-grade teacher with a knack for keeping things calm, helped me set up and promised to have my back. A few neighbors, including Carolyn Hayes from across the street, showed up along with some coworkers. The vibe was warm until Susan and Jessica walked in. Susan scanned the house like she was appraising it, her lips pursed. Jessica, dressed in a flashy outfit that screamed her latest failed fashion venture, barely said hello before snapping photos of my living room. I ignored it and played host, offering drinks and making small talk. Halfway through the evening, Susan pulled me aside to the kitchen. "Laura, this house is gorgeous," she said, her tone oddly sharp. "It's too big for just you. Jessica could use a place like this to get her life together." I froze, thinking I'd misheard. "What do you mean?" I asked. Susan crossed her arms. "Jessica's struggling. You know, her online store didn't work out. She needs stability, and you can help by letting her move in." I stared, my stomach twisting. "Susan, I bought this house with my own money. It's mine." Her eyes narrowed. "Family helps family, Laura. Jessica's your sister. You owe her this." Before I could respond, Jessica joined us, her phone still in hand. "Yeah, Laura, why do you need all this space? I could start over here. Maybe relaunch my brand." Her voice dripped with entitlement, like my home was her backup plan. I took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. "Jessica, I worked for years to afford this. I'm not giving it up." Susan snapped. "You're so selfish, Laura. Always acting like you're better than us." The room went quiet. Michael stepped closer, his hand brushing mine, but I signaled him to stay out of it. I turned to Susan. "This isn't about being better. It's about what I earned." Jessica rolled her eyes and stormed out to the backyard, typing furiously on her phone. Susan followed her, muttering about my attitude. The rest of the party was awkward, guests sensing the tension. Carolyn whispered, "You okay, Laura?" I nodded, but I wasn't. I felt betrayed, ambushed in my own home. A few days later, I got a call from my coworker Stephen Carter, my boss at the accounting firm. "Laura, you need to see this." He said, his voice tense. He sent me a screenshot from a local Facebook group. Jessica had posted a long rant calling me a greedy sister who refused to help her in her time of need. She claimed I'd hoarded the house to spite her, painting herself as a struggling entrepreneur and me as heartless. The post had dozens of comments, people I barely knew calling me selfish, saying I should do the right thing for family. My heart sank. I'd spent years building my reputation, and Jessica was tearing it down with lies. I called Michael that night, barely holding it together. "She's trashing me online," I said, my voice shaking. "Why would she do this?" Michael was furious but steady. "She's jealous, Laura. You've got what she wants, and Susan's egging her on." He urged me to stay calm and not engage online, but it was hard. I scrolled through the comments, each one like a knife. A neighbor I'd met once wrote, "Some people don't know how to share." Another said, "Poor Jessica, stuck with a sister like that." I wanted to scream that I'd never taken a dime from anyone, that I'd earned every brick of that house. The next morning, I confronted Jessica over the phone. "Take that post down," I said, trying to keep my voice even. She laughed. "Why? It's true. You're sitting in that big house while I'm struggling." I snapped back. "You're struggling because you don't work for anything, Jessica. Stop lying about me." She hung up, and the post stayed up. Susan texted me later. "You shouldn't have upset Jessica. We'll talk about this house again soon. That soon turned out to be worse than I could have imagined. I tried to brush it off, hoping it was just her usual guilt tripping, but 2 weeks after the housewarming disaster, I came home from work to find an envelope slipped under my door. My heart sank as I opened it, a legal notice from a law firm. Susan was suing me. The letter claimed I had used my father's unallocated inheritance money Jessica was supposedly entitled to buy the house, and that my dad had intended this property to be a place where Jessica could get back on her feet. Susan was demanding that the court force me to either sell the house or transfer half its value to Jessica in order to fulfill family obligations. I stood frozen in my living room, the paper trembling in my hands. This wasn't just a family fight anymore. This was a lawsuit that could cost me my home. I called Michael immediately, my voice shaking. "Susan's suing me over the house," I said, barely believing the words. Michael, always the calm one, told me to come over to his apartment. When I got there, he read the notice, his jaw tightening. "This is insane, Laura. You bought this house with your own money. She's making this up, and she has no case." His confidence steadied me, but I needed more than reassurance. I needed a plan. Michael suggested I find a lawyer who could shut this down fast. "You're not alone in this," he said, squeezing my hand. "We'll figure it out together." The next morning, I reached out to my coworker Stephen Carter, who had warned me about Jessica's Facebook post. He recommended Rebecca Coleman, a sharp civil litigation attorney with experience handling cases like this. I booked an appointment with Rebecca that afternoon. Her downtown office was no-nonsense, stacks of files everywhere, and a coffee mug on her desk that read, "Justice served." "Tell me everything," Rebecca said, pen poised over a legal pad. I laid it all out, my years of saving, how I bought the house on my own, the fight at the housewarming, and Susan's demand for Jessica to move in. I showed her Jessica's Facebook post, which was still up, and racking up comments calling me a selfish sister. Rebecca's eyes narrowed. "This is harassment, and it's damaging your reputation. We'll address that in court as well," she said firmly. She explained that Susan's case rested on a shaky claim that my father would have wanted me to support Jessica with the house, based on some vague promise Susan claimed he'd made before he died. There was no will, no contract, just Susan's word. Rebecca was confident we could win, but she warned me that the case could drag on and rack up legal fees. "If Jessica's lies keep spreading, we'll countersue for defamation," she added. I nodded, feeling a mix of relief and dread. Hiring an attorney wasn't cheap, but I couldn't let Susan and Jessica bully me out of my home. Over the next few days, I started seeing just how much damage Jessica's post had caused. One of my firm's longtime clients, Mrs. Ellen Parker, canceled a meeting with me, citing concerns about your character after seeing the Facebook post. My boss, Stephen, called me into his office looking uncomfortable. "Laura, people are talking," he said quietly. "I know none of this is true, but clients are asking questions." My stomach churned. I had spent years building trust as a CPA, and Jessica's lies were unraveling it all. When I checked the group again, I saw that Jessica's post had even spread to Twitter. Strangers were tagging me as that greedy sister in Portland, and some had even found my work email to send nasty messages accusing me of abandoning family. I decided to confront Jessica again, this time in person at Susan's house. My hands gripped the steering wheel as I drove over. Susan answered the door, her face cold. "What do you want, Laura?" she asked. Jessica stood behind her, smirking. "Take that post down," I said, my voice steady despite the anger boiling inside me. "It's full of lies and it's hurting my career." Jessica shrugged. "People deserve to know the truth about you." Susan chimed in. "You brought this on yourself, Laura. If you had shared the house, none of this would be happening." I was floored. They were doubling down, blaming me for their actions. I turned and left, my heart racing, knowing this was only the beginning. Back home, Michael helped me draft a formal response to the legal notice denying all of Susan's claims. Rebecca filed it the next day, along with a motion to dismiss the case, arguing that Susan had no legal grounds. She also advised me to document everything: texts, emails, even Jessica's post, as evidence. I spent nights scrolling through comments, saving screenshots of the worst ones. My neighbor Carolyn Hayes stopped by to check on me. "I saw what Jessica wrote," she said, shaking her head. "It's cruel. You don't deserve this." Her support meant the world, but the weight of the lawsuit and the public shaming was crushing me. As the weeks passed, I braced for what was coming. Rebecca warned that Susan's lawyer was pushing for a court date soon, and we needed to be ready. Deep down, I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to this, that Susan's desperation to get my house for Jessica wasn't just about family. As the court date drew closer, the pressure felt heavier with every breath I took. Every time I looked at the stack of legal papers on my desk, it felt like I was being pulled deeper into a nightmare with no way out. My lawyer, Rebecca Coleman, spent hours preparing me for the trial, drilling me on every detail of how I'd purchased my house. "Stick to the facts," she told me. "You earned it. They have no legal claim." Michael stayed by my side through it all, bringing me coffee during late-night prep sessions and reminding me I wasn't alone. When the day finally came, I walked into the Multnomah County Courthouse, my stomach in knots, but my head held high. The courtroom was smaller than I expected, with wooden benches and a stern-looking judge, Patricia Evans, presiding. Susan sat across from me, her expression cold and determined, flanked by her attorney, Daniel Foster, a wiry man with a practiced smirk. Jessica was there too, nervously avoiding my gaze. Rebecca leaned in and whispered, "Stay calm. We've got this." Judge Evans called the court to order, and the battle began. Daniel opened with a story designed to pull at heartstrings. He claimed my father had wanted the family inheritance to be shared, and that I had unjustly enriched myself by using funds that should have belonged to Jessica to buy the house. He argued that my purchase was unfair, leaving Jessica with nothing, and urged the court to protect her rightful share by ordering me to sell or transfer half the home's value. He even cited a vague promise my dad supposedly made before he died about providing Jessica a stable place to live. I clenched my fists under the table as Rebecca objected, calling it hearsay. Judge Evans sustained the objection, her face unreadable. When it was our turn, Rebecca was relentless. She laid out my bank statements, pay stubs, and mortgage records, proving beyond any doubt that every cent used to buy my home came from my own earnings and savings. "My client, Laura Mitchell, worked for years to purchase this property," Rebecca said, her voice steady and measured. "There is no evidence of any family agreement, no will, no documentation of shared inheritance. The plaintiff's claim is unfounded." Then she called me to the stand. I recounted my journey, working since I was 16, paying my way through college, never asking anyone for help. My voice stayed even though my hands shook slightly on the witness stand. Across the room, Susan glared at me with pursed lips, and Jessica fiddled with her phone, clearly anxious. Cross-examination was brutal. Daniel tried to twist my words. "Didn't you know Jessica was struggling financially?" he asked. "Don't you feel a duty to help your sister given what your father would have wanted?" I met his gaze and answered firmly. "Jessica is an adult. I worked hard for my house. She can do the same." Rebecca smirked as Judge Evans arched an eyebrow. Daniel pushed the family obligation narrative, but without hard evidence, no will, no trust document, no credible witnesses, it fell flat. Rebecca's motion to dismiss the inheritance claim was gaining strength by the minute. The real turning point came when Jessica took the stand. Rebecca had done her homework. "Ms. Bennett," Rebecca began, "can you explain why you believe you're entitled to any portion of my client's property?" Jessica stammered, parroting Susan's line about Dad's wishes and family duty. Then Rebecca delivered the blow. "Is it true your online clothing business collapsed last year, leaving you with $20,000 in unpaid debts?" The courtroom went silent. Jessica's face turned crimson. "That's not relevant," she mumbled. Rebecca pressed on, holding up documents from Jessica's failed company. Just trendy unpaid invoices, creditor emails, and bank statements showing her overdrawn account. Your Honor, the plaintiffs are not seeking justice, Rebecca argued. They are attempting to use my client's home to cover Jessica Bennett's personal debts from a failed business venture. Susan's lawyer objected, but Judge Evans allowed the evidence. Her gaze shifted sharply towards Susan, who shifted uncomfortably in her seat. I glanced back at Michael in the gallery. He gave me a subtle nod, pride shining in his eyes. Susan was called to the stand next. She tried to sound self-righteous, claiming she was protecting Jessica's future, and that I had dishonored my father's memory by not sharing the house. Rebecca cut in with precision. Mrs. Bennett, did you ever contribute financially to Laura's education or the purchase of her home? Susan hesitated, then admitted she hadn't. Then why, Rebecca asked, should Laura be forced to bear responsibility for Jessica's debts, or your interpretation of a family promise? Susan faltered, mumbling something about family loyalty, but it was clear the foundation of their case was crumbling. Finally, Rebecca called a surprise witness, my former neighbor, Carolyn Hayes. Carolyn testified that she'd seen Jessica spreading false accusations about me online, intentionally damaging my reputation to pressure me into giving up the house. She had saved screenshots of Jessica's defamatory posts, which Rebecca submitted into evidence. The posts were damning. Jessica had publicly called me a selfish hoarder who stole her chance at a stable life. Judge Evans studied the screenshots, her expression tightening. After both sides had finished, Judge Evans delivered her ruling. This case lacks any legal foundation, she said firmly. There is no evidence of a family agreement, will, or obligation. Ms. Mitchell purchased her home with her own funds, and the plaintiffs have no legal claim to any part of it. But she didn't stop there. Furthermore, the judge continued, the plaintiff's actions, including spreading defamatory statements about Ms. Mitchell, have caused undue harm. She dismissed the case in its entirety and ordered Susan and Jessica to pay my legal fees, over $15,000. Susan's face went pale, and Jessica looked as though she might cry. A wave of relief swept over me, but it was tinged with sadness. This was my family, and it had come to this. As we left the courthouse, Michael hugged me tightly. You did it, he whispered. Rebecca shook my hand with a rare smile. They didn't stand a chance, she said. Winning the lawsuit should have felt like closure, but I knew Susan and Jessica wouldn't let go of their resentment so easily. In the months that followed, I learned just how much the court's ruling had cost them, not just in money, but in the way their lives unraveled. Meanwhile, I made a choice to leave that toxic chapter behind and build something new, surrounded by people who truly cared. Word spread fast in our Portland community. My neighbor Carolyn told me she'd heard from mutual acquaintances that Susan and Jessica were struggling to pay the $15,000 in legal fees Judge Evans had ordered. Susan had dipped into her savings, already stretched thin from bailing out Jessica's failed ventures. Jessica's debts from her Just Trendy clothing line weren't just the $20,000 revealed in court. Carolyn heard whispers of unpaid suppliers chasing her for thousands more. Their financial mess wasn't my fault, but I couldn't help feeling a twinge of pity. Susan had always banked on Jessica becoming a success, and now they were both drowning in the fallout. Their reputation took an even bigger hit. Jessica's defamatory posts exposed during the trial turned old friends against them. Carolyn said a local business owner who'd once partnered with Jessica on her online store publicly called her out for dodging debts. Susan, who'd always prided herself on being a respected figure in the neighborhood, stopped showing up at community events. A coworker of mine, Emily, mentioned seeing Susan at the grocery store looking worn and avoiding eye contact. Jessica, meanwhile, deleted her social media accounts after the backlash grew too loud. I didn't gloat, it was sad to see them spiral, but I couldn't keep carrying their weight. I decided it was time to cut ties completely. After the trial, I blocked Susan and Jessica's numbers and removed them from my social media. The last message I got from Susan was a bitter text, "You'll regret turning your back on family." I didn't reply. Family doesn't sue you over a house you earned or smear your name online. Letting them go felt like lifting a boulder off my chest. For the first time in years, I could breathe without their drama pulling me under. With that chapter closed, I turned to building the life I'd always wanted. Michael was my rock through it all. We started spending more weekends together exploring Portland's food trucks or hiking in Forest Park. He'd tease me about my terrible sense of direction, but his steady presence made me feel safe. One evening, over tacos at a spot on Alberta Street, he looked at me and said, "You're stronger than you know, Laura. I'm proud of you." Those words hit deeper than I expected, and I realized I was falling for him in a way I hadn't thought possible. Carolyn became more than just a neighbor, she became a true friend. She'd drop by with homemade cookies, insisting I needed a break from work. We'd sit on my porch laughing about her quirky book club or swapping stories about our lives. She introduced me to her friend David Martinez, a local photographer who'd heard about my ordeal. David offered to feature my story in a community newsletter, framing it as a tale of resilience. I hesitated, not wanting more attention, but Carolyn convinced me. "People need to know you're not the villain," she said. The article was small but heartfelt, and it helped clear the air after Jessica's lies. My career bounced back stronger than ever. After the trial, I met with my boss, Stephen Carter, to address the damage from Jessica's posts. He was supportive, assuring me the firm valued my work. I took on bigger clients, including a local nonprofit that praised my attention to detail. Emily, my coworker, invited me to join her trivia team at a downtown bar, where I met a group of her friends, fun, grounded people who didn't care about my family drama. We'd spend Thursday nights laughing over obscure questions, and I started to feel like I belonged somewhere new. I also began investing in my home, making it truly mine. Michael helped me repaint the living room a soft blue, and we built a small garden in the backyard, planting herbs and flowers. Carolyn suggested hosting a barbecue to celebrate, and I loved the idea. It was nothing like the housewarming disaster, just close friends, good music, and no expectations. Emily brought her famous potato salad, David snapped photos, and Michael manned the grill, joking about his culinary skills. For the first time, my house felt like a home filled with people who showed up for me. Looking back, the lawsuit was a painful but necessary turning point. It forced me to see Susan and Jessica for who they were, people who'd never value me the way I deserved. Cutting them out wasn't easy, but it gave me space to grow. I'd spent so long fighting to prove myself, first as a kid, then through their lies and legal threats. Now I was done proving anything. A year after the courtroom victory, I stood in a small garden venue in Portland, my heart racing as I adjusted the lace on my dress. Today was my wedding day, and Michael, now my fiancé, waited for me at the altar, his smile brighter than the July sun. The past had been a storm: Susan's lawsuit, Jessica's lies, years of family drama, but I'd come through it stronger. This moment, surrounded by people who loved me, was proof I'd built a life worth celebrating. The ceremony was simple but perfect. Carolyn, my neighbor turned best friend, helped plan every detail, from the wildflower bouquets to the string quartet playing softly. My coworker Emily was my maid of honor, her laughter keeping me calm as I got ready. David, the photographer who'd shared my story in the community newsletter, captured every moment, his camera clicking as I walked down the aisle. When I reached Michael, he took my hand and whispered, "You're my home, Laura." I nearly cried right there. We exchanged vows, promising to support each other through anything, and when we kissed, the small crowd, friends, coworkers, neighbors, cheered loudly. After the ceremony, we danced under twinkling lights, surrounded by people who'd become my chosen family. Emily gave a toast, joking about my trivia team obsession but calling me the strongest woman I know. Carolyn raised her glass, her eyes misty, saying, "You deserve this happiness, Laura." I looked around, realizing home wasn't just my house. It was these people, this love, this moment. I'd spent years thinking family meant obligation, but now I knew it meant choosing who lifted you up. As for Susan and Jessica, their lives had taken a darker turn. Word around Portland was that Susan had sold her car to cover part of the $15,000 legal fees from the lawsuit, but it wasn't enough. A mutual acquaintance, Lisa Thompson, who ran a local cafe, told Carolyn that Susan was behind on her mortgage, her savings drained from years of funding Jessica's failed dreams. Jessica's troubles were worse. Her creditors had caught up with her, demanding payment for debts tied to her clothing line and a new venture, a pop-up boutique that collapsed in weeks. Lisa mentioned Jessica had moved to a small apartment, her reputation in tatters after her lies about me were exposed. No one in the community trusted her anymore, and old friends had cut contact. I didn't wish them harm, but their choices had built their own consequences. Sitting with Michael one night after the wedding, I reflected on what I'd learned. Growing up, I thought I had to earn love by being perfect, good grades, hard work, never complaining. Susan and Jessica taught me that some people will never see your worth no matter what you do. Cutting them out wasn't just about protecting my house. It was about protecting myself. Setting boundaries meant saying no to guilt, no to drama, no to people who saw my success as their entitlement. I'd fought for every piece of my life, my career, my home, my marriage, and that fight taught me. My value wasn't tied to their approval. Home became more than a building. It was Michael's laugh when we burned dinner trying to cook together. It was Carolyn's texts checking in on me. It was Emily's trivia nights and David's photos hanging on my walls. I'd built a life not just through hard work but by choosing who I let in. Self-reliance got me through the toughest years, but love and trust made it worth living. I wasn't perfect, and I didn't need to be. I just needed to be me, Laura, the woman who kept going, no matter what. To everyone who's followed this story, thank you. Your support, your comments, your time, it means the world to me. Sharing this wasn't easy, but knowing you've listened makes it worthwhile. If my journey resonates with you, please subscribe to the channel. There are more stories out there, and I'd love for you to hear them. For now, I'm stepping into this new chapter with Michael, my home and my heart full. Thank you for being part of it.